got 11:01 and people are still kind of entering, but we'll go ahead and get started, respect everybody's time. So thank you so much for joining us today for this panel discussion on how states collect, document, and communicate their client impacts. So we know everyone works really, really hard to provide good services to the small business community. And if you don't capture some of that impact that you have on your customers, your clients, then how do you, number one, improve your program? How do you report to maybe the people who are funding your program? And how do you tell your client success stories? So that's kind of some of the benefit behind collecting, documenting, and communicating these client or customer impacts. So I want to get started here today with a few logistics. And I want to first of all thank my colleague Allison Crowther. She is on working kind of the background, letting everybody into the program or into the webinar here today, and then she'll also be monitoring for questions and things too. So let's see, Allison, are we recording?
Yes, we are.
We are. Great. So we have started recording this webinar, and it will be posted on our metrics page, which I'll get to in just a minute here. But you should be able to see my screen, and you see the welcome and logistics. And if for any reason during this program you can't hear audio, we lose our screen, anything like that, don't be afraid to speak up, because we want to make sure that we are communicating our message as we go forward here. So we're asking everyone to stay on mute and keep their camera off unless you are speaking. So then when you're speaking, if you would turn your camera on, introduce yourself. If you're comfortable with that, that would be great. And I think most people know how to toggle their mute button and their video button on the horizontal bottom screen. As you float your mouse down there, you will see a menu bar come up, and that's where you can control your own video. You can also do it from the participants list, your video and your mute button. So we're going to practice something right now, because you do have the option also on that lower screen to raise your hand. If you have a question, you can also use the chat box. So I'm going to ask people a question. If you attended the 2019 metrics training, or you've watched it on either YouTube or on via our web page, would you just raise your hand? We're going to get a feel for how many people have participated in that. So just raise your hand. So you'll go to that lower menu and raise your hand if you watched the metrics training or participated in it. We had probably close to, I want to say, 40 or 50 people participate when we did it in 2019. And so, there's a good chance that we've got a lot of new people on this training, which is great. Okay. All right. So, Allison, can you lower all the hands? That'd be great. Thank you. Okay, thanks everyone. So now you had a chance to practice raising your hand. If you have a question at any time during this training, we do want you to be able to ask those questions, and I'll monitor the timing, and if we've got to somehow change the way that we manage the questions, we will do that. But I don't expect this training to go much longer than 40 to 50 minutes. We'll stay on an hour if we've got good discussion, but just to let you know what the expectation is there. And so I will ask that you please participate in the poll questions. We're going to do a couple poll questions in just a minute. There's 5 in total today, but those poll questions help give us feedback right away, so that as panelists, we can kind of tweak our information towards you as the audience. It helps us know who the audience is. It also helps us who are putting on this training get some metrics or some data for this training too, and finding out, where are people at when they come into the training? How much did they learn? Will they act on the training that they have participated in? So I do want to mention that this training will be archived. We will put it on the metrics page, and I'll show you the metrics page here in just a minute. The metric page contains the 2019 detailed webinar, and it also contains some sample forms that we made into kind of a generic fashion to allow people to personalize them if they want. And I'll show you those in just a minute. But right now, Allison, can we go to poll questions 1 and 2? Great. So what you're seeing, you guys, what should have popped up on your screen are 2 poll questions. And so you should be able to view those. They popped up right in front of my, my slide here, and you will just click on them. So question number 1 is, on a scale from 1 to 5, rank your knowledge on this topic. 1 is, I know nothing about it. 2 is, I have some limited knowledge on the concepts. 3 is, you've got knowledge, but you haven't implemented. 4 is, you've got moderate. And 5 is, you're an expert. Great. So we want everybody participating. And then you can move to question 2 as soon as you're done. So question 2 is, do you use client evaluations or feedback forms? And we've got a couple of options there for you. Yes, we use a generic feedback form for all inquiries. Yes, we use a personalized feedback form that gets sent out to specific clients or customers. And the other one is kind of, we do it occasionally. Maybe you do it for your trainings or webinars or workshops. And then no, we're not using anything at all. Looks like we have 28 of 40 people eligible who have voted. So we're going to give it just a couple more seconds here, 15 seconds, 34, 40. All right. It's great if you can participate in these polls. All right, a couple people have not participated. You've got about 2 seconds here to finish up. Okay, we've got the majority of people have participated. Allison, do you want to show that? Thank you. All righty, so on a scale from 1 to 5, ranking your knowledge, you can see that 49% of our audience on today say that they have a moderate level of expertise on the topic. From there, it's kind of a tie between they know nothing about it or they've got some limited knowledge. And then there's a few people who have some knowledge, but really just not sure how to implement a process. And so we're going to give you, 3 different ideas today on how to gather this information from your clients, what to do with it, and then how to document and report it. Question 2 was, do you use client evaluation or feedback forms? And we may have different names for these. I'll kind of use that term evaluation and feedback interchangeably. And so you can see the majority of our audience here today says, no, we do not use any process to obtain feedback from our clients. So that was 37%. So this tells us we have 49% of our audience that has moderate expertise on the topic, but only 37% of the audience, but only 12% of that 49 who have moderate expertise are actually using some type of process. So you will hear about those processes. Okay, and then next up from there was, yes, we've got a generic feedback form. So many folks may have at the bottom of their email, hey, take our survey, tell us how we're doing. We'd love to hear a little bit later during open discussion how that works for you. And then after that, it's we send occasional feedback forms for trainings and outreach, but not for site visits or hotline calls. Okay, great. Well, we can stop sharing those results. And I think I can do that. All right. So you can, on your screen, if it doesn't close out automatic, just go up and exit out. And you should be able to remove that poll box. Okay, so next up, I just want to remind you that in November of 2019, we did a very detailed metrics training. And so Kansas did that. So I was the one who presented that. And we went into a lot of really basic detail on metrics, what they are, how you can evaluate them, very, very specific examples. In addition, we provided, we took a couple of forms that are used by a few programs, and we made them into a generic format so that in Word, so that you could download them and you could personalize them and use them for your state. These are forms that are used for site visits. One is a pre-assessment form. So when a client calls you, wants to schedule a site visit, you send them this form. It does a couple of things. It's a way of them committing to you that yes, they're going to give you some information before you come on site. So you know, what is their main issue? What are their concerns? What's their process? How can I better be prepared when I go out on site? What regulations do I think are going to apply? And then that way you're better off serving the client. You're more efficient with your time. The other example there was to give a report, and there are generic reports available where you put in recommendations, and then maybe 6 months, a year later, you do the specific site visit evaluation, and it's based on that pre-assessment form, and it's based on your report. So that is very detailed. That is there for you to watch. This is where we will post this recording today too. As a result of us already having that detailed information about the Kansas program, we will just reference that. We will not be providing a bunch of detail that's already in that metrics training. Okay, so I hope I made that clear, not too confusing, but I just want to let you know that there's a few things we're going to breeze over, because if you need more information, you need more basics, go to that metrics training. So before we begin and get into our panel, I just want to remind you of this chart. And many of you have seen this chart a few different times. There's more detail in that archive metrics training, as I mentioned, but today we want to point out two main terms found across the top: outputs and outcomes. In summary, and based on EPA definitions, outputs are sometimes what we call beans, counting the beans, right? They are environmental activities or efforts and are associated with our work products and are produced or provided over a specific period of time. Outputs can be quantified. They might be qualitative or quantitative, but they have to be measurable during an assistance agreement funding period. Now, when it comes to outcomes, they are very important and not as easy to get. So it's pretty easy for us to get our beans, right? We can get those. We just have to keep track of them. We probably have a lot of beans that we don't keep track of. I always say we probably hit, if we're lucky if we are able to keep up and track 70% of our outputs. And we can always do better tracking our outputs, but they're not nearly as important as our outcomes. Those take more time to track, but they are the result and the effect, the consequence that occurs from carrying out an environmental program such as small business environmental assistance services. And they are related to environmental or programmatic goals and objectives. Outcomes may be environmental, so they could be tons of HAPs reduced. tons of VOCs produced. They're an outcome. They might be pounds or gallons of solvent reduced or avoided, dollars avoided, dollars saved. They might be behavior changes. So people change the way that they were operating a process. That was a change in behavior, and it results in also that is considered an outcome. I should clarify. So behavior change is considered an outcome. It can be a double whammy though, because if you change your behavior and the way you're handling inventory control, you may have less expired material on the shelf, and you can save money as a result of having a better control on your inventory. It can be programmatic in nature, but it does have to be quantitative, specifically quantitative. So pounds, gallons, tons, and then it's HAPs, VOCs, solvent, hazardous waste, dollars. Okay, so let's see. What I would like to do next, not want to dwell on the outputs, but really focusing on the outcomes. And the reason this is so important is this tells the story of our programs, and it tells the story of our program successes. It helps you sell your programs. We really want you reporting your outputs and your outcomes in the annual report. And that is part of why we have the timing for today of this training, because it is time for annual report that is open until the end of March. And we want you not just to put in your outputs, but also your outcomes. So with that, I want to introduce today's panel of SBEAP programs. Troy Johnson is here from Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and Dan Sowry is here from Ohio EPA. I'm Nancy Larson with Kansas State University and the Pollution Prevention Institute. We are also the host for the National SBEAP website and communication program. Our format today is we've got a series of 6 questions that each of our panelists is going to rotate and answer. We'll pause for questions after each of the 6 questions. So Troy, we're going to end up having you go first. Let me make sure I didn't miss a poll question. I did miss a poll question. Okay. Troy, before we get going with you, we're going to do one more poll question. So Allison, can you put poll 3 up? This one says, based on the information presented in this slide, this output and outcome, does your program collect outputs, outcomes, both, neither? Got about 50% of the vote here. Okay, great. Well, we've got almost everybody voting. Thank you very much. Okay, 86% of the vote is in. Let's close the poll. And you can see that the majority of our audience today is collecting both outputs and outcomes. But they're maybe not translating that to an evaluation process and a reporting process, because we probably only have maybe 10% of our audience that fills out the annual report for report any outcome. So this is motivation for you. If you are collecting these, please put them in the annual report. Looks like, and I would expect this, most people are collecting outputs. And there's no one just collecting outcomes. So that makes a lot of sense. 20% of us, about 20% of us on the webinar today are not doing either. So hopefully we can help you so that you will start collecting both outputs and all those all important outcomes. So please close that poll if it isn't already closed on your screen. And I just mentioned our panel. So we're going to start out with Troy first. And Troy, so I'll turn it over to you to answer these questions. And then if there are questions from the audience, we will just go ahead and take those. You can raise your hand or chat those. We'll be monitoring those. And then from there, we'll have Dan go, and then Kansas will go. So thank you, Troy. If you don't mind introducing yourself a little more, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy. My name is Troy Johnson. I coordinate the SBEAP program in Minnesota. And right now it's -5 degrees, not counting wind chill. I'm glad to be inside and looking forward to spring sometime. So we have been doing client surveys for many years, and it hasn't always looked the same. And in fact, some of our first survey work was done during workshops that we were doing, and then it sort of evolved into, let's do site visit surveys. And so we would just simply, hand them a sheet of paper with a set of questions, and it was a quick survey. But we don't do that exclusively anymore. We do most of our survey work through hotline calls, and since our site visits always start with a hotline call, that's how we include the folks that we do site visits with. With web hits is really the only measure that we do for web. We don't have any advanced analytics, although that might be nice, but we're just not in a position to do that. So that's what we're doing, at least for that first question here. So I'll turn it over to Dan.
All right. Well, so Dan Sowry, I head up the Small Business Environmental Assistance Program for the state of Ohio. We are one of the larger programs in the nation, which we're very fortunate to have that, but that also comes with a set of challenges as well. When you have a larger budget for a program like this, you always feel like you're in the hot seat and you potentially could lose your program the next day too. So in terms of outcomes, outputs and outcomes, I think it's vital, when I kind of start off with that we tell our story. We've done a really good job for several years since this program has existed of bean counting. But to say that we helped 1,000 businesses in a year, it doesn't tell the story of the impacts and the outcomes. So this is something that, I sat in on that presentation that Nancy and team put on at a prior training, and I was really intrigued with how do we end up telling our story. So, and we'll get into that as we go through these questions. I have some graphics I can show you of what we've been able to do. So in terms of this specific question, what are the services that we evaluate? So we evaluate site visits, our hotline, any type of webinars or trainings that we do, or workshops. We do, just like Troy said, we do see the number of hits on our webpage, but we don't have any advanced analytics to really see anything more out of that. We also have a chat feature. So on top of our hotline, we have a chat feature. We have folks Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, that can answer chatted in type of questions from literally anybody, which has its challenges there too. Then we also, in our email correspondence, when we're just helping somebody out over email, we also include a survey there just to see how we are doing. And then also, not in terms of an actual survey, but in terms of looking at our metrics and understanding what we're doing and our impact, so we can make any tweaks or adjustments as necessary. We also put out a quarterly newsletter and then a monthly e-blast as well. So in that, we will definitely look to see how many people have actually clicked on, or how many people have actually opened the email. That's number one. So we do all this through Oracle, and Oracle allows us to see who actually opened the email And then even further, did they click on something in that email, which indicates that they maybe possibly read something? And I'm not sharing those results with you because they're horrible. But as we go through these questions, you'll see that taking that data, it may not be the results that you're looking for, but that's an opportunity then to make tweaks and adjustments so you can get your message out there better.
Cool. I totally agree. We learned so much from this process, and I mean, we're always in this continual improvement process. We've got we've got a couple questions that have come in. They just popped up. Let's see here. Maybe I just got a chance to see them. Looks like, okay, those questions have been answered. Sorry about that. I just saw them pop up here. Because I accidentally advanced the slide. So I'm going to answer panel questions number 1 now. So that's really interesting that you have that chat feature on your website. We have in Kansas, our program is at a university. We have our regulatory agency wanted to have the SBEAP outside of the regulatory agency. So we have from day one, about 1998, we have been the SBEAP arm of the Kansas 507 program. And so we, being the technical assistance arm, we do site visits, hotline workshops, website. We also are agency out of the College of Engineering, and we are grant funded. So we apply for other grants. One of the big grants that we've had that actually created the Pollution Prevention Institute, our agency, is the EPA's Pollution Prevention Grant. So we compete every year for those, and we've been pretty successful with those. So that allows us to integrate P2 and really kind of leverage our SBEAP program as we work with different industries. That is also part of why we've been very, very motivated to get outcomes, because EPA P2 wants those outcomes. And in fact, in our program, that's how we pay for these evaluations and our time doing the evaluation. So yes, we do client service evaluations on site visits. And if you go to the metrics training, you will get the detail on exactly how we do that, more detail on how we do the pre-assessment, why we do it, how we do the reports, why we do the reports, and then how we do the post assessments. And then what do we do with those? And so those do take time, but we do them. Our hotline is a little different process. We actually have a support person who goes in and evaluates our hotline callers, and we don't get as good of a return rate on that. Our workshops and virtual trainings, we are constantly changing that. Sometimes we do it in polls within the training itself. Sometimes we do it after. Sometimes we'll do a pre-assessment of our registrants before the training, and then we'll do a post-assessment that mirrors it so we can get behavior change data. And then, like many of you for our website, we will simply use those Google Analytics or some other analytics for our website. Okay, I'll pause there. Are there any questions I see one question has come in. And Sarah Johnson is asking, if I tweet a document to lead them to the web page, I can get before and after tweet numbers of the visit. Visits go up to document after every single time. So she's sharing that she's having successes tweeting her web page and promoting, it sounds like, Sarah, you're saying promoting your on-site visits or a document that you might have just posted. So feel free to unmute yourself and clarify if I didn't get that right.
Yeah, you got it. What I've started to do is to try to increase traffic to my webpage. I am sending out a tweet about a document I want to talk about, or something relevant. Like right now I'm doing wood boilers because it's relevant how cold it is right now, and dry wood actually got a lot of hits. So I looked at my analytics the day before I sent out the tweet, and then for that month, so let's say the month of December, and then I looked at the analytics for what it was for the month of January when I sent the tweet, and it went up a lot. I mean, I wouldn't say like hundreds, but it went up. So I think leading people to my page, my docs, is working, and tweets work. I'm sorry, they just do.
Yeah, and we're not really addressing too much in the way of social media here, but that's a great point. Because if you are doing social media, as Michelle and others here who are really communication specialists will tell you, that when you do a tweet, you need to direct them back to your website. If you're just tweeting to tweet, it doesn't do you a whole lot of good, right? The purpose is to direct them to your resources and get them using your resources. So good point. Thank you, Sarah. All right. So we're going to go on to the next question then. Okay, so this one is, what methods do you use to evaluate these services? So being specific about your methods. And we'll go again to Troy.
Okay, well, this is our process. And as I said, that it's evolved over time to kind of fit our needs, our capabilities, and our activities. And so right now, whenever we get a phone call, we log the call in a Microsoft Access database. And we also log, our site visits in there as well. And so when we're doing that, we try to record everybody's email, as many as we can anyway. And then we download a list of emails from everybody that's contacted us in the last 6 months. And we email a link to a survey. And so when the customer receives that link, they open up a web page, and it's a SNAP survey. It's like SurveyMonkey, but it's SNAP, and we use that because we can store that data on our own server, and then we're in compliance with our own agency's data policies. So once they fill out the survey, and it's a pretty quick survey, then the data gets stored ultimately in an Excel spreadsheet. And from there, then we use another software program called Tableau to view that data. And I'll show you a little bit more about what that looks like later, maybe in question number 3. So that's our process right now. So we do this survey twice a year. And as I was preparing this, I realized that we use 4 different software applications to do this. So it's kind of complicated. And I know that there's going to be a simpler way to do that, perhaps with a CRM or a customer relationship management software program like Salesforce or something of that nature, where it would be beneficial to be able to help kind of consolidate all your data into one system.
So Troy, can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
So you download, so from site visits, hotline, workshops, anyone you've had contact with, whether it's on site or through the phone or through a training, you'll download a list of their emails and they all get the exact same survey?
The exact same survey.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
All right. So, and if I have a chance, Nancy, I'd like to show one screen that I have to illustrate a point. But so for site visits, we do a survey just like Troy was talking about. We send them out a survey, and it's SurveyMonkey that we end up using, and we can use those analytics. For our hotline, same thing. So with chat, which is kind of like the hotline, you never know what you're going to get. But with chat, we're doing this through Oracle yet again. We love Oracle. And the problem is when customers are asking questions, they don't necessarily know maybe what they're asking or what category that would fall under. So what we've done is we don't leave it necessarily up to the customer. Our own staff will then pick a category that may apply. And that's the one thing I want to show here. And hopefully you guys can all see this.
Yes, we can.
So, all right. So these are just the number of the different chats and the different types of questions that maybe have come in. So I'm just going to scroll down through these. One thing that I don't know if you can see my cursor or you can see my little hand moving on this thing or not, but Troy's nodding his head yes. So check that out. 382 public water system monitoring. This is for asset management that I think a lot of us are dealing with. And we had some reporting deadline in November, and that just made a ginormous spike. But what this does, and this kind of gets into some of the later questions, but I might as well approach it now. Here's another graph just kind of showing you the different types of questions that we get. But I think we're back now, right?
Yes, we are.
But what this allows us to do when we see the types of questions that we're getting, we'll also look at, the types of the number of people that will register for a specific webinar or training that we have, or if we put on like a whole conference, like we put on a virtual conference last fall, which tremendously successful. Usually we reach about 350 to 500 people. And with the virtual conference, we reached over 10,000. So this has been a game changer in this telecommuting world. But what we can do then is understand this is maybe an area where we need to focus more guidance or tools towards, or maybe future webinars or different sessions or workshops based on the types of questions that we're getting and the frequency that we're getting those. So back to Nancy, what you had up on the screen with this slide. So for the hotline, we're entering that stuff into a database. For presentations, we're sending surveys afterwards. For web use, like I talked about before, we're looking at the number of clicks on a particular type of document. For chat, I was able to show you a couple graphics on that. Email correspondence, we always send a SurveyMonkey with every single one of those. And it's one of those that we put in the bottom part where, you don't necessarily want to just have a link of a survey, fill this out. This is one of the tactics we have seen the benefits from, is we use this phrase where we say, how did I do? My management's really looking for feedback on how I did. Please, click on the survey and let them know how I'm doing. But what that does is typically these the clients that we're working with, they're very frustrated that they have to deal with any of these requirements. It's convoluted. They don't understand it. They don't want to get in trouble. And maybe they have just a poor view of government in general. So they're pleasantly surprised when somebody is actually willing to help them and to walk them through the process. And they give us glowing reviews as well. But then I can turn around and use those reviews. And again, I'm jumping ahead on what we're gonna talk about. But that's what I can use for staffing needs, to be able to show that we're making a great impact. This is a well-received service, and folks want more. And that can help me in going to my management when I'm seeking to fill positions or maybe get some more staff into the program. And then lastly, I talked about the quarterly newsletter and the monthly e-blasts, and we're just looking at how many clicks that they have on a particular link that we sent out or an email that we sent out, and then any embedded links that happen to be in there.
Okay, great. And yeah, newsletter is not something we included here, but we probably could have, definitely. So thanks for sharing that. So I have provided in Kansas like I said, more detail already. I'm not going to go into it other than to say we evaluate all of these things. Our process, like I've mentioned before, but I'll just briefly say, with the site visit is to do that pre-assessment first, the report, and then the post-assessment. That's all detailed in the metrics training. I will mention that when we do the pre-assessment, that is a commitment from the client up front of the work that we're going to be putting into this, because doing site visits is a lot of work. But we also, on the back side, we asked them if they would be willing to participate in a customer feedback after the process. And I think we've had 100%. I can't remember any of our clients who say they won't participate. So when we go back to them with this evaluation form for site visits, we remind them that they agreed to participate. This is really important to providing our funding. And so we get probably at least a 60% return rate on our site visit feedback form. So what we do in Kansas is we have the specialist who does the site visit, personalizes the site visit evaluation form. And it is very specific to get those outcomes. So this is doing site visit evaluations in Kansas is a very different process from doing any of these other items, because the site visits are where we provide that one-on-one service, and also where we get greatest implementation. We are able to get compliance rates from that. We're able to get pollution prevention implementation rates, and then we are able to get those outcomes. How much money was saved, how many VOCs were reduced, was there a change in material, change in inventory, how much hazardous waste was reduced, how much water was saved. Not so much on water as much, but definitely air and waste. Then when it comes to the hotline, I mentioned that before, that's kind of a standard set of questions. One of the last questions is, would you make changes as a result of what you learned on the hotline? And we have a lot of clients who say they did. Do you reduce waste as a result of what you learned from the hotline call? And on any of those that say yes, we follow up to get that outcome data and to understand their story a little bit more. And then finally on hotline, would you use our services again? And it's 96, it's usually in the high 90s, say they would use our services again. Workshop virtual trainings, I've kind of already explained that. And then we don't do any evaluation of our web users, not yet. So we have not dove into that realm of where you get that pop-up survey and it says, please, give us feedback on our website. So I expect that will come though. So let's move into the next questions. So these are all kind of stacked together here on one slide. But Troy, can you explain what environmental or behavior change metrics and measures you are able to get from your evaluation process?
Sure can. I'm going to share my screen.
Okay, I'll stop sharing.
All right, you should be able to see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Great. So this, if you recall, our clients go to a web-based survey. That data gets dumped into an Excel spreadsheet. And from that, then we use this Tableau software to actually view the data that's in the Excel spreadsheet. And so then we can visualize data in different ways. And so we can come up with some metadata about, there we go, about, who's taking the survey. Are they small business? Are they large business? Are they consultants, etc.? We can keep track of the number of surveys over time, each time we do them. And on average, it's taking about 3 to 4 minutes to fill out the survey. So we also track the main reasons why they're contacting us. If you can see that, I'll pop it up here. And we can measure knowledge gained. So, probably 95% have indicated that they have a better understanding of environmental regulations now that affect my business. We can measure behavior or action. What did they do? Most applied for a permit. They indicated they saved time, etc. And in the future, this is what they expect they'll be doing. Be following environmental regulations, filling out forms, surprise, surprise, deciding how regs affect their business. And then we also have some customer satisfaction type measures as well. Overall, how satisfied are you with our service? We can measure that. Would they call us again? And would they recommend us to others? So that brings me to the last part is the comments, just the open narrative that we give them a chance to kind of tell us how things were going. And so those are really nice to get quotes, to get all this information really is helpful. All right, Dan.
All right, so same thing. I'm going to share the screen here in a second. So hopefully I'll look for Troy to nod his head if this thing showing up properly. All right, cool. So this is just, same type of thing. We take those metrics, we take all those bean counts, and then we can put that in some kind of visual form, or it gives us a better idea in the state of Ohio where our greatest impacts are, potential staffing needs, potential issues that we might have, focus areas. So this is just an example of a typical month for our program and what we may end up doing around the state. So and you can see we have 5 different district offices, and we have environmental assistant staff in every one of them. I think 40% of the work that comes out of our agency is out of our Northeast district office. So I could probably put a dozen staff up there. I currently have 2, and they're absolute rock stars. And the amount of work that they handle is mind-blowing, what they're able to accomplish in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. But there's just an incredible amount of work up in that part of the state. So it's like, I think I said 40% of the agency's work actually comes out of our Northeast district office. Let's see, here's some for our recognition program. That's not really what I wanted to show. We also have a dashboard that, and this leads into the next question too, but this is a dashboard of just, taking that data that we have. And I think, Troy, you use the same thing with Tableau. We use that as well, just to be able to kind of put it in a graphical way that you can kind of make sense out of some of this data. And then I'll save the other stuff for later. I talked about this earlier too, but we're looking for where are we, let's say maybe a specific industrial sector is having a real hard time with a particular regulation. Certainly when we have new regulations that come out, everybody kind of trips over themselves, and we got to help them through that process. And we're educating ourselves on those new regulations, sometimes simultaneously. but it also gives us more of an idea of exactly where we need to put more of our focus. Is there a particular programmatic area that folks are having trouble with? Is it a specific industry that's having issues, getting in compliance with that? And one thing that I don't think that we talked about, I didn't put it up in the beginning, but in terms of metrics, we also look at our notices of violation and our enforcement issues that are going on in our agency, because that also is an indicator of where folks might be struggling, or maybe we need to put on a workshop in a particular area of the state or for a specific type of industry. And then we also try to get into our, we want to be a fly on the wall, if you will, with our regulatory programs. And so we have, over the years, weaseled our way into some of their meetings where we hear the inside discussion of our Division of Air Pollution Control, if they're going to all of a sudden have some initiative where they're going after dry cleaners or collision repair shops or whatever, or gas stations or whatever it might be. We can learn about that stuff ahead of time, and then hopefully, as we did with the Environmental Results Project in Region 5 for 6H, we can get in front of it, help to educate these folks, hopefully alleviate potential violations in the future if they do end up getting inspected.
Okay, so we have a couple of comments here, and a few folks are sharing kind of some software that they've used. So Jennifer Collins mentioned microdynamics. You can see all these in the chat, you guys, so you can open them up and look at them too. Let's see, she's talking about Power BI and platforms. So we'll give some time to maybe talk a little bit more about some of this information that people are sharing. We started using Airtables for our customer relationship management needs. It's working great. So this is really good to share these different kinds of softwares. One of the things that came out of the discussion that Troy and Dan and I had was we were preparing for this, and we floated it to Belinda Breidenbach, because she's she's the chair of the education subcommittee, is maybe doing a session on what are the customer relationship management tools you use, because that could take a full another hour, right? Because I'd love to, I'm really enjoying hearing about the software that other folks are using. And then Leah asked a specific question to Dan. Do you happen to have a URL you can drop in the chat box so they could look at the 3-column report? The graph that you just showed, she's saying. And then Michelle said, we're tracking program setups, and are they maintained by a computer specialist? Or is it possible for a typical SBEAP staff to set this up? So that's a good segue into what we do in Kansas, Michelle. So Dan, I'll let you answer Leah specifically on, or directly on her question. But Michelle and others, the way that we do our program is very individualized and probably archaic in some ways, but it is what's worked for us. I don't know if we'll make an investment in a customer relationship management program or not. Smart people like Allison and others in our program can probably help evaluate and advise us on that as they come in with kind of fresh eyes and look at some of the things that we're doing and help us to identify, hey, why aren't you doing it this way, right? Kind of like some of the things that we do for our businesses. Fresh eyes come in, we identify ways to improve that we might not have thought of before. But one of our programs, like I said, site visit, that's labor intensive. That's an old-fashioned program, but it's very specific to the company and what our recommendations were. And as a result, we actually, like I said, we get compliance data from that. We get, of the 100, compliance recommendations that we made for these, 20 companies, how many were implemented, and we get compliance data from that. I do detail exactly how we do that in the other training. So I don't want to go over that now, and I didn't prepare extra slides to show you today, just for the reason that it is in that other training. Then the phone process is through an email, and through follow-up on our hotline is through personal contact with phone. One of the things that we try to do is make sure that we're working with people, because we need to build relationships. We need to build relationships with small businesses and larger businesses, maybe for our P2 or our P2 intern program. But so much of this, and so many of our champions come, champions for our programs, and some of the outcomes that we get come from us having a good relationship with various companies and knowing their processes. And then often we can find out, gosh, they've got a success story. Maybe we can nominate them for an award. So we do ours very differently. And then, of course, we use software, Qualtrics software mainly right now, for any of our online surveys that we might do, or evaluations that we might do, similar to what you would have gotten after the annual report. So that's kind of our process. And we do get environmental and behavior change metrics from that. We get them from the small business side, but we also get them from our intern side, just like others who have intern programs. You are able to get that outcome data. And let me just put a plug in there. So I told you that the reason that we have funding to do this kind of evaluation process is because it's dedicated pollution prevention funding from EPA, even though it helps our SBEAP program. And so when you go to the annual report, you will see that we're asking you to report environmental or behavior change metrics or measures those outcomes. And we just tell you, if it was paid for by a different program, just make a note of that. Like, this was paid for by EPA P2 grant. We've already reported it to EPA through that mechanism. We would still like to see that data. So if that's similar for your program, then be sure to make that note. So I'm trying to work in the annual report here too. Okay, so I think what I'll do is I might answer these last 3 questions, and then Troy and Dan will have you kind of do that as well. We've kind of answered some of those already, I think, in our presentation. So I'll just start out, and then I'll go to you, Troy, and Dan, you can kind of wrap us up. But to how and whom do you report these results? I've already mentioned EPA is who we report them. We do put them in the annual report, but we say how they were paid for and who they were reported to. We also use this to tell the story. This week, we are negotiating and meeting with 5 different bureaus at KDHE, the regulatory agency. We use this information to tell the story about how our services are impacting small businesses. And so each year we negotiate contracts to do our SBEAP program, and it's very prescriptive. We don't have a lot of money to do technical assistance, but we do stretch it by complementing it with P2 dollars. We do a lot of program specific or project specific types of work. So we're doing, harmful algal bloom for HOAs and other small businesses. We're doing a hemp project this year. We're doing air permitting webinars, but all that in addition to our on-site and hotline technical assistance. We learn a lot from our process, and I do talk about that quite a bit in the other webinar. We learn how to change. We learn who some of our champions are and where our success stories are. That's how we get this evaluation process, is a lot of times how we get companies willing to fill out or be nominated for an award. So we do learn, sometimes we learn and we're very humbled from what we learned, that we gave the wrong information. We did not hit the mark on what that client needed. That's just an opportunity for us to dive in and learn, or look at our process and reevaluate it. And so every year that we do this process, we look and we change our process or tweak it or confirm it. We actually have a standard operating procedure for each of these processes that I've mentioned to you. So with that, let's go to you, Troy.
Sure. Well, we share our reports through the annual report, through MPCA leadership. And at times we have it on our website, our brochures throughout the years. What do we learn? Well, really just to stay nimble and open to how we do measurement. And, you know, the questions that we ask, do we use paper? Do we use electronic? And also this is kind of a non-scientific, you know, approach as well. It's not statistically relevant, at least the way we're doing it. We're not. So, you know, just keeping that in mind too, when we look at the results. And lessons learned, I guess for the most part, it seems like we're on track with the feedback we're getting. And it helps us tell our story, and it uses voices from others to do that. So that's been of benefit to us. Dan?
All right. So we report these findings primarily internally. Externally, I don't know that folks really care. Maybe the legislative body would if they're questioning our funding appropriations, but most of this stuff is shared internally. In terms of what do we learn from the process? Well, I think one of the hardest things that we've learned is that creating fact sheets and guidance documents and throwing them on your webpage does not mean that anybody's actually looking at them, reading them, or getting anything out of them. So I think we've definitely learned different ways of doing things, and I think I'd like to share the screen with this last one as well. But in terms of like lessons learned and changes made as a result, I wanted to illustrate something that really shocked me with our virtual conference. And when you can see this, I always look for Troy to give me the nod that is showing up there. Good. Okay. So this is wackadoodle. You know, normally when we put on a conference, it's an in-person conference. And so if you want to pay for airfare and you want to come from another state to learn about Ohio's regulations, more power to you. But I don't think we really had an appreciation for the need until we put on a virtual conference. And we spread that virtual conference over 3 weeks, where each session was only an hour. And so we would have, you know, technical Tuesdays and Thursdays. We learn Wednesdays, and Mondays and Fridays of the week, it was maybe keynotes and recognition ceremonies or panel discussions. But what we didn't see, and this has definitely warped my mind in terms of like, how do we do this in the future? This conference, we had 37 states and provinces, as far north as Ontario, as far south as Puerto Rico, and as far west as California in our conference. Why? Well, I suspect it's because corporate environmental may be in another state, or their consulting firm is in another state, but they have several businesses that are clients of theirs in the state of Ohio. And look, they need to learn this information. And I think one thing that we've found is that businesses aren't trying to do the wrong thing. They just don't know what the right thing is, and they're afraid to ask. So if they can get the answers to their questions without raising alarm bells, and without spending a bunch of money, and without exhausting, a lot of their time, like you would for an in-person conference, where you literally maybe have to take a whole day or two out of your week to be able to attend it in person, we've seen that we can hit a lot wider audience in this new virtual world. And that has definitely changed the shape of how we do these webinars as well. So we have a whole webinar series that we're doing this year, and I have to give kudos to Jennifer Dixon and her team in the state of Michigan and their Eagle program. We definitely saw those numbers and have touched base with her to understand, like, how did you guys do that? How did you get to such crazy numbers that, 200 people in a webinar, 6 months ago was absurd. We never thought we could do that. And then, we freaked out about, oh my gosh, how are we going to answer all the questions? How are we going to deal with this? We went through that conference and we learned a lot of lessons through that. But like I have a webinar this afternoon. It's actually at 2 o'clock. So at some point in time, I need to get over to that. But we have over 1,000 people on it, and it's how to prepare for a stormwater pollution prevention plan. So obviously the need is there. So we've learned a great deal there. The other thing I wanted to show you and kind of touch on are outcomes. So we have been really good, and I think a lot of us do this. We're really good at bean counting, but bean counting doesn't tell the story. It doesn't tell the impact. So as part of our program, we also have a $4 million annual recycling grant program where anything grant related or recycling related we can help fund, whether it's recycling containers or tire amnesty events or roadside cleanups or equipment like cardboard balers or shrink wrap balers, scrap tire processing, those sorts of things. But unfortunately, I think we got too comfortable with bean counting of how much money we gave out and how many projects, but we weren't telling the stories. We had the stories in their outcomes. And so I've directed the staff to go back and look at those outcomes, look at those closeout reports that we have on grants. So for like 2018, this just gives you an example of the impact that grant program has. In just 1 year, we've cleaned up 2,600 miles of roadways in the state of Ohio. That's equivalent of driving from Ohio to California. 175 miles of shoreline, whether that's inland lakes or it's Lake Erie itself. These are incredible numbers that we've been able to accomplish. And ironically, yesterday afternoon, I had a meeting with top management and the director of the agency to see if we could maybe go back to the controlling board to be able to spend more money. So we just closed our applications for 2021 grant cycle. We received 117 applications with $7.5 million, $7.6 million in requests, but we only have spending authority for 4.6. So by being able to tell our story, we're able to go to the controlling board, which is the legislative body, to say, hey, can we spend this money because here's the impact. Look at what we're able to do for the state of Ohio in 1 year with these grant dollars. So I couldn't stress enough the importance of not just looking at your outputs, but actually looking at your outcomes and then telling that story. And that's how your programs can also figure out and justify staffing needs as well. So yeah, I will stop there.
Okay, that is great. Thank you so much for sharing that, and congratulations on that, the outcomes that you got from that grant program. That's pretty cool. That's exactly, those numbers are the things that really speak to our funding agencies, our management, to the legislature, to the ASBO's office or whoever else, EPA, our state regulatory agencies. And so this is just kind of an open discussion. We've had some good discussion in the chat, and I encourage you to do that. If I missed your question, please feel free to unmute yourself. And just some things to think about. How and what does your program measure? Are you required? Is anybody required to do this as part of their SBEAP program specifically? And so I'm going to ask a poll question in just a minute. Again, just a reminder to put that information in the annual report. So in the annual report, we really want things that impact your SBEAP program. So if you've got, some of the bigger projects, that maybe your agency is doing, but it's not small business wise, that's fine to include it. But what we're really looking for are those small business numbers. Some of the other things that we've already discussed and some other questions going forward, will metrics be required in the future? I know if you were working with EPA, they are required. And so do you think you could expand your program? If you took the time to collect and report these metrics, would that make an argument for expanding your programs? And that speaks to many of you who are one person shows out there. There's majorities of our programs only have one person. The ASBO is looking at restarting some 507 program evaluations. We heard just briefly about that discussion at our last NSC meeting. So that's another way to be prepared for, starting to think about collecting these metrics. And then what's your biggest, I'd love to hear this, what's the biggest barrier to doing this work? So I would like to launch the last poll, and then I would love to hear from people kind of at the same time if you want to unmute yourself. So Allison, if you can launch that last poll. There's 2 questions there. There you go. We're seeing those now. So based on what you learned today, how do you rank your knowledge? So did your knowledge change a little bit about what the process could be, how to do it, and then who you might report it to? So maybe you were a 2 before, and maybe you're a 4 now. So what we knew before was about 40% of our audience ranked themselves as a 4. So they had the expertise, but we really only had about 30% of the audience actually, doing something with it. And you may not be required to do anything with it, but hopefully we're wanting to give you the tools and hope and the motivation, right, to kind of start to implement something, even if it's just baby steps. And, Troy, Dan, myself, we would be happy to help to mentor programs and, take a look at where you're at right now and see if there's some suggestions based on our knowledge from sharing this information that we might make with to you specifically. Okay, we've got about 80% of our audience. I'll just leave it open a second or 2 longer. So Allison, if you want to show the results. Okay, so what we see is based on your knowledge, how do you rank your knowledge today? So we've got an increase in knowledge, and 54% now say that they have a moderate level of expertise, and no one reported no expertise. If you go down to question 2, the results say, based on what you learned today, will you make any changes? 50% of the audience said yes. I know it's important, and now I have tools for making the changes. And then 36% said maybe, but it isn't a priority in my program. And that's just the honest truth there. Sometimes it isn't the priority in your program. So we'll stop sharing results, and you can close that window out if it's still there. And let's pause for a second to see if we've got some discussion or other people who want to share. Anybody see any chats or questions that came in that we need to discuss? Okay, I know we went over. I did not anticipate doing that. So so sorry about the timing on this, but I think valuable information was shared, and it was great to hear from Troy and Dan today. So I really appreciate everybody attending. Troy or Dan, are there any concluding remarks?
I think I talked too much already. So.
No, I did, I'm sure.
I guess one closing remark is, part of SBEAP is really to share and learn from others. There's no way that we in our program would have the success if we were not involved in SBEAP and we were able to benchmark and see what others are doing. And quite honestly, if I could be candid, to steal ideas from others.
Oh yeah, that's what it's all about, right?
Well said, Dan.
All right. Thought I saw one more chat come in, but it went away from me. So Allison, I'll ask you to take a look at that. Okay, well, with that, I agree. We are here as a national grassroots organization to really help each other. And if there's something you need, you can bet one of these other programs have already done it. And then you can steal it for free and you can put your own twist on it. So just want to encourage you to take just even a baby step to start collecting these measures, and don't be afraid of, asking your clients to provide you with feedback. They typically love you, and they can tell a great story, and then maybe you can help them get recognition too. So thanks everyone. We have recorded this training and it will be posted on our metrics page. As always, if you have any questions, please reach out to any of us. Have a great day and stay warm.